Well, first off, thanks to Confidence for having me speak. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to share to you guys. I've given some talks on similar topics before, but this will be my first time giving kind of this iteration of the topic of neurodiversity, hiring in different companies. So to begin, a little bit about me. I'm a cyber threat researcher with IBM's X-Force Iris. I am also the CFO of Mental Health Hackers, advocating for mental health issue awareness in the security industry and running events to help kind of bring awareness to that and support individuals struggling with mental health issues. We are looking for sponsors, so if that's something you want to talk about, please let me know. And then the reason I'm giving this talk and kind of the key qualification I have, if you want to look at it that way, is I am an autistic security individual working in the industry. To start off, I want to give some disclaimers. First, I don't have any formal background in psychology or any subject or medical training in this area, so I'm not claiming I do. I have read a lot of books and a lot of articles, but in terms of real expertise, I don't exactly have that yet. I have future plans, but for the time being, please know that my talk is not a medically certified presentation. But because of the work I've done through Mental Health Hackers and giving my talks, again, although I'm not a therapist, I do have a lot of people who message me, so I have had the exposure to a wide variety of issues that individuals are facing in the industry, which kind of gives me a unique background on this. And lastly, as I said in my About Me, I am an autistic individual, so a lot of this is personal experience. I'm not really sure how I ended up in Poland speaking in front of 50 people about this topic, but I did, so clearly something's going right for me. So to start off, let's talk about a high overview of neurodiversity. Essentially the concept, the way IBM, their kind of catchphrase is to treasure wild ducks. So individuals who think differently. In this talk, I'm going to be focusing on autism, ADHD, and bipolar disorder specifically, but really at a high level, the concepts and the key themes in here are going to apply to any individuals, schizophrenic individuals, individuals facing anxiety disorders, depression, those kinds of things. So the key theme applies as neurodiversity, which is why I gave the title itself. Another disclaimer, again, neurodiversity, just like any other diversity, within the subset of individuals facing different conditions, autism, bipolar disorder, etc., I cannot give a presentation that fully classifies all those situations. One of the key phrases, key kind of sayings people say is once you've met an autistic person, you've met one autistic person. You haven't met every autistic person. So I will talk about like different traits and different roles that will be well suited, but I'm not saying that every individual interested in security has to fall into those roles or will match those specific traits. One thing I found interesting when I was looking at kind of the diversity within these subgroups is a tweet that came out from an autism advocate. She kind of asked autistic people, like, you know, there's a lot of stereotypes. Which do you defy? And so someone said, yeah, I can't do math. I hate math. Stop saying that autistic people are good at math. Another person was like, eye contact is great. I love looking at people in the eyes. And then shortly after, she said, okay, there's stereotypes, but some stereotypes are fitting. So which stereotypes do you follow along the lines with? And there you go, I'm good at math and I'm terrible at eye contact. So just because some stereotypes are true and will apply to some individuals and are actual psychological traits involved, eye contact, there is many autistic people a psychological incapability to establish eye contact, but it doesn't mean every autistic individual can't. So the same things with everything I say. Know that there's plenty of individuals who don't fit those keys, so keep that in mind. So why at a high level should you be considering neurodiversity initiatives, looking at individuals for your team? First, you're going to have a wider spectrum of capabilities. By hiring only neurotypical individuals, you have a huge area of thinking, various thinking patterns that you're not going to get from a neurotypical individual. One analogy is sports, and I used to try and list different positions in American football, but then I realized I know nothing about sports, and so that kind of failed. But the general concept is you could have the best goalies in the world, but if you put all the best goalies on the same team, you're not going to have the best soccer football team in the world, because sports, they require a wide diversity of skills. You want people who are fast, you want people who are strong, you want people who are good kickers, who are good goalies. Building a team based on one really good skill set is going to make you good at that single thing. But when you come up against teams with a wide diversity of backgrounds, of thinking patterns, you're going to be more capable in the long run. And second, by supporting individuals with neurodiverse disorders, as there are likely already some in your organization that you may not even know about, creating an environment in which they feel comfortable and are happier, they're going to be more passionate, they're going to produce better work, you're going to have longer-term employees staying there because they feel that their environment is supportive. However, happier employees isn't really C-level talk. When you tell them you want to hire some people, create hiring initiatives focused on neurodiversity, a CEO isn't going to think happier employees, depending on the situation, is worth the cost. So what's the C-level speak of this? First, reduce staff turnover. So a statistic related to this is that direct replacement costs for a role can reach as high as 50 to 60% of an employee's annual salary, and the total associated costs, such as retraining up that new employee and all the different equipment, recycling and all that, you can reach up to 90% to 200% of an annual salary just to get a new employee in. Which obviously, that's a lot of money being spent. Especially in the cybersecurity industry, we have a very high turnover rate due to the demand. There is always someone willing to pay you more to go to their company. And 33% of companies, it's found that employers believe that employees with disabilities, if the environment is works with them, they're less likely to leave, just because it is more difficult for a neurodiverse employee to find an environment they thrive in. So there's less of a chance of employee turnover, which in turn equals cost, which the CFO and CEO are interested in keeping down. Second is consumer appeal. For example, the number of children diagnosed with autism, plus their direct relatives, such as their parents, grandparents, and cousins. Counting that out, in the US alone, is about 55 million people, meaning 17% of the US population in some way has a relationship to an autistic individual. Well, it's found that consumers are more likely to switch to a company, a different brand, or a different provider, if they show outward support for a cause that they feel connected to. So that's 17% of the US population who, if they look at a company that's saying we support autistic individuals, we want to help them, our autistic employees are speaking out saying they're happy, there's a good chance that you'll have consumers who are looking to switch to your company, partially based on the fact that they know you're supportive of a cause that's close to them. And then regulatory compliance. This one I kind of am iffy putting in because it is kind of a controversial thing in some ways. And I guess it may be less applicable to Poland, as I don't know your hiring laws. But in the US at least, a lot of cybersecurity companies, probably most of them, have a contract with the federal government for services or products or whatever they may need. And if you work with the federal government or any government agencies, they require a certain percentage of your staff be disabled in some way, including what are considered neurological disabilities, autism, bipolar, depression. So whether a good reason or not, if you really need to pull strings with the C-level, tell them that those autistic employees you're going in are meeting a quota. So one thing I really try to hit on in these talks and when I'm talking with both neurodiverse individuals and managers is it's a give and take relationship. In The Power of Neurodiversity by Thomas Armstrong, he talks about some key principles associated with neurodiversity. And one of the first ones, principle number 5, I believe, is that success in life is based on adapting one's brains to the needs of the surrounding environment. I, as an autistic individual, live in a world designed for neurotypicals, and thus I have to adjust some of the ways that I live day to day in order to adapt to the normal world. But, as I said, my key point, it's a give and take. Part of success in life is also based on modifying my surrounding environment to fit the needs of my unique brain. This is called niche construction, which I'll kind of mention that term again later. But basically, though I can do certain things to meet the environment that I live in and learn to live in that environment, my success is also partially reliant on the fact that I need to be in an environment that's suited well for me too. So I'm going to start off kind of focusing on autism spectrum disorders. This is probably, obviously, the one I'm closest to, the one that most heavily comes from personal experience. So some of the challenges I and other autistic individuals may face are communication, whether that be interpersonal communication, speaking in front of large groups. Obviously, I've done okay with that, but interpersonal communication, knowing how to communicate with coworkers and my manager is a bit something that I face more challenges with. Kind of an obsessive nature, not necessarily always impacting the job, but it can impact the personality and the way that interacting with an autistic individual can be much different, and sometimes an uncomfortable experience or something that is considered weird by a neurotypical individual who is seeing the obsessive behavior. Someone who you've probably encountered, as most of us have probably encountered autistic individuals, and it's that person who wants to talk about trains for half an hour, and no matter how hard you try to change the subject, it just won't work, and eventually you're in a situation where you're like, how do I get out of this? And so that kind of thing, though it doesn't impact the ability to do the job, once you get in a situation like that, you're less likely to want to hire or work with such an individual. And lastly, weak executive functioning. There's some areas of planning and how work is completed and the understanding of how to perform work and business functions. There's some struggles in those areas. However, so the strengths, an extreme attention to detail. Autistic people see things on a more granular level than neurotypical people, which of course can be a great strength for security professionals. Expanding further to IT, an example is quality assurance testers. You'll find a lot of autistic people in those roles, and that a lot of companies with autism hiring initiatives are hiring for quality assurance testers because we're the kind of people who can nitpick at every little issue and find all the problems, which can be annoying in a general sense where that's not an important part of your job, which is why roles where, it's a good thing when you're pointing out the tiniest of mistakes is a strength. And lastly, high productivity. One of my strengths is I can probably do 3 to 4 times the amount of work that a coworker can do. I'm not sure why, but it's something I've found in multiple jobs and that I've heard from other employers of autistic individuals. It's just how my brain works. I'm able to do more work. So you're getting, 4 times the value when you're paying me. You're paying me the same as another employee, but you're getting 4 times the value, so it works out. So niche construction, like some things, again, this is definitely not an inclusive list, but to get an idea of the little things that don't hurt an employer in any way, but are often overlooked as some things that can be super important. Modulation of sensory input. One of the big aspects of autism is hypersensitivity, whether it be to textures, sounds, taste, that kind of thing. For me, I have a severe aversion to certain textures of food, which doesn't really affect my work stuff, but it is something where it kind of makes me weird. I seem like a picky 3-year-old when I'm eating, but I just have a lot of concerns. Like, for example, a work thing is I'm very, very particular about what I wear. I struggle to do my job if I'm not comfortable. And so finding roles where I can wear what I want, obviously appropriate clothes, but I can wear jeans and a t-shirt and not have to dress up in a blouse and dress pants and stuff like that. That was something I literally considered when I was job hunting, is what do I have to wear for work? And it was negative points if I had to dress in business attire. And then stimming, this is, again, something you may see, kind of a stereotype of the flapping hands. For me, it's when I'm sitting down, typically I cannot stop shaking my left leg, and depending on the situation and my emotions or my energy level, it may be pretty noticeable. But in the end, does it really affect you if somebody's moving a body limb a little bit? So not creating a judgmental environment or pointing that out, and just accepting that it's something the person does can make more of a difference than you think. So some negative job elements, some jobs that individuals may struggle with. Multitasking, something where the person's working on one thing and then you want them to switch to something on no notice, or here, do this and this and this and this, all at the same time by the end of the day. High level of socialization. Again, I've met autistic people who love being, I know some people, autistic IBMers, who are in HR roles or who travel to customer sites. But there's a lot of us who would prefer to work in an office alone. And, I like having a team, but I don't like having to go out to other teams or having to work with customers. So I fit well in a role where I just have my team to talk to, and there's other liaisons to deal with managers or other teams. And lastly, tied to the niche construction, roles with a sensory overload are probably going to be more difficult roles to handle. Maybe. Okay. Positive job elements, roles where autistic individuals are going to tend to exceed, are ones with routine, repetitive tasks, and logic. So we like to know what we're doing, what's going on. So roles such as incident response are a bit more difficult. I love doing digital forensics and incident response, but I admit that the not knowing what's going on, or last minute, hey, you gotta do this now, that's a bit more of a challenge, whereas a routine in a role I am now with threat intel, where I have a task and I'm working on that task and is kind of procedural, I like that. Repetitive tasks, so again, less security specific, but an example that people understand, like data entry. That's something that there's a strength in, and even better about that is that's typically the roles that most neurotypicals hate, the mundane, repetitive tasks, which those are the ones that I love. So at my current role, there's a lot of Intel data entry into our database, and a lot of cataloging of data, and a lot of fixing of human error type things. And nobody loves doing that, but I love data entry and categorization, and so I'm the one who will spend hours sorting through the database, looking for any typos and fixing those, and going through all the data and tagging it. So that gives me a strength, and I like it. Others like not doing it, and so it works out for everyone. And again, logical tasks where I can figure out problems and follow a path of logic. Again, there's creative autistic people who aren't as strong in the logic areas, but one of the common thinking patterns is logical. So what are some example job roles matching this? Obviously, I'm in a threat research role, and I find that's very suitable. Typically, it's a set schedule, of a specific time. I'm not being called at 2 in the morning for an incident. I'm looking through data, I'm processing data, I'm understanding a logical path. Threat hunting, again, that attention to detail really comes in with the threat hunting part, the being able to sit through millions of logs to identify a specific activity. The pivoting, I love the logic of I have a IP or a hash and I want to find related indicators, I want to find malicious activity on a network based on that stuff. So threat hunting role. And then vulnerability analysis. I've done a bit of this, and it's not really my cup of tea, but there were parts I did like about it. Just having these reports, raw data, and having to sift through it and find, okay, what's actually relevant to my company? What do these vulnerabilities mean? How should I prioritize? That kind of thing. So moving on to bipolar disorder. I worked with a bipolar security analyst on this section, which I'll mention later who he is, and so I've kind of got both some research in books and his opinion. So some challenges faced. Obviously, the key characteristic of bipolar disorder is the mood swings, the ups and downs, euphoria, depression, rage. Typically not great for a work job that you just decide one day you don't feel like working, or you come in angry and you don't want to deal with people when your job deals with people. So a second aspect, typically less with bipolar in general, but more schizoaffective disorder, is psychosis. The bipolar and schizoaffective individuals I've talked to said that really becomes a problem at work when they're in their space. No one understands what they're going through, and they can't focus on work with the psychosis kicking in. And kind of related to the psychosis, the distracted thoughts, especially during the major mood swings, all those thoughts you're having distracting from the work. The strengths, though, there's pretty strong empathy in individuals with bipolar disorder. Energy during manic states. During a manic state, a bipolar individual gets that passion, that high productivity, that kind of other things similar to what I talked about in autism. And creativity, so there is that creative spin that not all logical security people have. So niche construction, bipolar individuals are going to be well suited in an environment where they feel they have meaning, purpose, they have a goal that they have to focus on. Hands-on environments where they get to work with their hands, and also being able to work for oneself as opposed to being in a more traditional environment working for an employer. So the example job roles, cybersecurity analyst is a good role. Penetration testing and social engineering were the key ones, though. I kind of talked through with some bipolar individuals is kind of that empathy and the nature of kind of penetration, social engineering, like jobs being able to, a bit more flexible of a schedule and being able to work in that period of mania and work through that. So those are good roles for those individuals. And the last key category is the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So this is definitely very common. I'm sure everyone in this room knows someone who has been diagnosed with ADHD if you haven't yourself. And it's very common in the security industry. Mental health hackers, we had someone come forward needing help, and we posted on Twitter, hey, can we get some feedback? And dozens and dozens and dozens of tweets from ADHD security people talking about their experiences. So the main challenges are weak executive functioning. As with autism, again, that's things like planning, prioritization, scheduling, things that are kind of business-centric skills that are typically important to a job role are more challenging for individuals. And then hyperactivity being one of the key aspects of ADHD, kind of not wanting to sit still in an office all day and struggling in certain areas of that focus, maintaining focus. Strengths actually include hyperfocus, which seems contradictory to the fact, both the stigmas and those kinds of things that most people assume it's super distracted. ADHD people are able to hyper-focus on certain things. It just isn't always the thing they should be hyper-focusing on. But in a state where they are focused and interested on a task, it's an extreme level, producing high productivity and great work. And then hyperactivity, again, though it was on the challenges slide, it's kind of also a strength in the way that in the right job role, that hyperactivity can be channeled in a way that produces high quality work, a lot of work, high productivity and stuff like that. Niche construction, the kind of environments that these individuals will thrive most in most cases. A role with physical movement, being able to use that energy in a physical way as opposed to sitting in a cubicle for 8 hours a day. An environment with change where, whether it be task change, location change, role change, that kind of thing, being able to swap back and forth. High stimulation environments, similar to the energy, being able to channel that hyperactivity into an environment that is acceptable in, and hands-on activity is generally more interesting to such an individual as opposed to rote, routine activity. So the job elements kind of translated from that niche construction that may be ideal for such an individual is being able to travel or move around frequently, whether that means being able to travel to different states, countries, cities for engagements, or it just means moving around in the buildings or in a location to be able to channel that hyperactivity. Again, working with one's hands. Being actively involved with new situations, almost opposite to what I like about the routine same day to day. ADHD individuals prefer to be able to change what they're working on and see new things and try new things. Handling emergencies. You'll actually find a high concentration of ADHD individuals working in law enforcement or in fire departments, because that environment of kind of high adrenaline is something that works very well. And working for oneself, another place where you'll find a high concentration of ADHD individuals is CEOs of companies. They tend to thrive. Okay. So example job roles from the emergency perspective and kind of correlating the love for law enforcement work and fire department work is incident responders. Obviously that correlation's there, that being able to chase down a threat, the adrenaline of an attacker in a network, figuring out what happens, stake of the company is on the line, is the perfect environment. Threat hunting, being able to get into a hyper-focused move and follow all those paths to find an attacker. Again, the adrenaline of we know something bad is happening, but we've got to get the whole scope. And consulting roles specifically, because of that, being able to travel, move around, and then especially most consulting roles, especially in security, you're on an engagement, doing something for a few weeks, but then you're off to something else, so that change in role. So what are the key takeaways for all the potential people in this room? For the neurodiverse individuals, the lessons I've learned and the things that I recommend to people, you gotta recognize your strengths and weaknesses. I know what I'm good at, I know what I'm bad at, and I've learned to kind of articulate that to my managers, because I know that I can thrive in a situation where I can leverage my strengths, and I know that bad things are going to happen if I put in a situation where my weaknesses are come out more. I learn what works for me. That niche or that kind of learning to work in an environment I'm in. There's some things that I have to learn to do differently that individuals that are neurotypical may not. For example, kind of related to my like clothing fabric sensitivity, these pairs of jeans, I have 6 pairs of them, and those are all my jeans because, you know, I'd rather have 6 pairs of the same jeans. I don't have to think about what pair of pants I'm wearing in the morning. I don't have to worry about trying and picking out new clothes, and like those little things that are kind of weird and maybe hard to figure out, I found are like the things that reduce the stress in my life and help me kind of maintain the balance and the peace. And so I save everything I buy on Amazon so that I can hit reorder. If the pair of pants rips, I can just replace them with a new pair quick. And then self-improvement and self-care, recognizing that you do have a medical condition that requires treatment and care, whatever that treatment may be. Again, that's finding what works for you. Maybe you want to be on medication, maybe you don't. Therapy is an option. Working out, exercising alone can be that self-care you need to feel better about yourself. But whatever it is, making sure that you also take into account that you are treating a medical condition, and so you need to identify what's needed for that and take the appropriate time and steps to do that. As an organization, if you're in the C-suite or if your organization is looking to you for recommendations, what can you do? Well, first, promote neurodiversity. Show to potential employees, to consumers, to your staff that you are a company that respects neurodiverse individuals and even promotes that. And so beginning just the culture of here is the kind of organization we want to portray ourselves and the kind of environment we want to make. Look into neurodiverse hiring initiatives. There's many big companies. If you search autism at work, there's this kind of overlapping organization composed of different companies such as JP Morgan, Microsoft, IBM, and SAP, just to name a few, that all have hiring programs internally specifically focused on creating a recruitment process that works for autistic and other neurodiverse individuals, since the hiring process is another aspect that they handle differently. And there's programs already set up. For example, IBM, in order for us to do a hiring program, it's not just some people internally. We work with an organization called Specialist Turn, where basically they are finding and working with and training autistic individuals and then helping place them with potential employers who are contracting with them, kind of like hiring a recruitment agency, but focused on autism. Support managers and employees, so create an organization where if a manager says, hey, I have this employee, I need to make this accommodation, can we make this work? Be willing to work with those managers and employees. And lastly, something not as common to find in organizations, but for all employees, not just neurotypical and neurodiverse, but also neurotypical employees, investigate how you can offer mental health benefits. Look into healthcare plans that will help cover therapy costs and stuff like that. So it's not as common. You may get great health benefits for any physical conditions, but then you go to get therapy for your depression and all of a sudden nothing's covered there. So, and those things can be expensive. So as an organization, look into the ways you can do that. Another example being like mental health PTO, making sure, have mental health days that your employees are required to take a day off and just relax and make sure that you're not burning out your staff. From stepping down a tier to the manager level, the main thing for managers is to accommodate and adjust. Learn that the management methods you use for your neurotypical employees are not going to be the same ones that work for your neurodiverse employees. And learn what that means. It takes time. It's a different experience, but working with it will work. Advocate for your employee, both among your coworkers. Make sure that they're supported by their own team. Make sure that if they need anything, your management, the manager's management, is supportive and helping, and that the organization recognizes that its managers and employees find this important. And then, actually, this one's probably the most important, is patience and understanding. There is going to be a learning curve for both the manager and the employee, especially for first-time employees entering the workforce. They've never had a job before, and they themselves haven't learned how to adjust to their environment. So it's important to recognize that it may take some time, and there's definitely going to be some hiccups you may not typically experience with a neurotypical employee who kind of naturally understands the business world. The business world and having a job is an environment that was created for them, essentially. You're going to experience challenges, especially early on, and so just trying to stick through that and not immediately dismiss the employee and decide that it was a bad hire because there are some challenges early on, because neurodiverse individuals, again, adapt. We learn how to work with our environment, but we can't learn what we don't know, so we need a time to adjust, and we will adjust. As a coworker, what can you do? Awareness, just making yourself aware of a situation that individuals may be in. This is a good, general recommendation. Like, even if you don't know your coworkers are neurodiverse, keep in mind that everyone thinks and works differently. But especially in a situation where you have a coworker who thinks differently and works differently, understanding that the way you approach them and they approach you will likely be different than what you've experienced in the past. One thing I always push with my new teams is to ask questions and learn. I have teammates who come and ask me questions all the time about certain things, and I'm happy to answer. I'd prefer you ask rather than just accepting social stigmas and stereotypes. Ask me and I'm not going to be offended. Like, I want you to learn. Like, it does me no good for you to make assumptions or to just be mad at me. Ask me a question, and maybe I'm doing something that I didn't know I was doing, and I can learn from the experience too. And again, patience and understanding. I might make you mad or stress you out or something. Ask questions, learn, point things out, but also work with me and don't, hate me as a coworker early on when I'm still learning. So I specifically wanted to shout out to a few people who have helped me out. Patrick Putman, he's the bipolar guy I was working with. He's very forward about his stuff, and he has a blog called The Bipolar Hacker, so you can check him out and read his work that he's done on this, ask him questions. He was very helpful and answered a lot of my questions, so I really appreciate that. Amanda Berlin, or InfoSister on Twitter, she's the CEO of Mental Health Hackers, and by bringing me in and heavily involving me with her organization, I've met a lot of people, stuff, and it's been great being a part of that and really important to me. And then, of course, my manager, Nick Bradley at IBM, he lets me travel and come and do these talks, which is really nice, and additionally, through some challenges, he's adjusted his management styles. When I say something's not working for me, he figures out a way to make it work. So it's really important that he gets recognition for that, because not all managers can handle a situation like that. Not all managers let employees go to Poland to present at conferences on work time. So, is there another slide? I forgot a conclusion slide, so that's it. So thank you for letting me speak and for coming to this talk. It always makes me happy to see a relatively big audience and know that, the message is getting out. I always say if one person learned something, then, my time here was worth it. So did anyone have any questions that I can answer? Like I said, I like questions. Yeah.